box which was brought here.
Right. So this is where the Ark of the Covenant used to be placed during festivals.
Yeah.
And then this is a holy tree.
Yeah.
Why they call it holy tree?
Yeah.
Because it was just there for a long time.
Because a lot of Saint Yared received holy
Saint
music
Yared had his
here,
miracle here, yeah.
this place. So
Yes.
it's holy place.
Welcome back, everybody. So as you can see, this is the beginning of a new series, and who knows what we will uncover. The title of the series is Hymns and Homilies, a New Focus for Research. And what we are in particular looking at is the idea that there are Christian texts which influenced the writing of the Qur'an. A number of scholars have indicated a link between the Qur'an and Christian hymns, notably Gunther Luhling and Christoph Luxemburg, and I'm sure many, many more. But those are the two most popular ones. So I'm going to be looking for any evidence for links between hymns, Christian hymns that predated the Qur'an, and I'm looking for direct similarities and also for examples of intertextuality, which is the notion that a text, instead of borrowing directly, makes allusions to it or uses the ideas or perhaps even just an odd word or here or there. It can be quite tricky to know when a piece of text has been influenced by another piece of text. I was reading a book by an author whose name escapes me, but it was about Bob Dylan, and he was looking at the intertextuality of his song lyrics, and I was amazed at where the lyrics were being influenced from, and everything from Ovid to Homer to folk songs to you name it. It came from all over the shop, and it wasn't a clumsy borrowing, but often it was the use of a phrase but then reworked and where possible made even better and more poetic. So it's not just a simple case of finding a paragraph that has been plagiarized from an earlier text. It's a little bit more subtle. Now, it's not to say that coincidences don't happen, but there's usually enough there to determine if, or there should be at least, to determine if there's some sort of influence between two texts. So what evidence is there that Ethiopian texts may have been used in the Qur'an? The strange presence of Ethiopic words is a clue that there's something going on. According to G.S. Reynolds, the Arab words Injil, Gospel, and Ma'idah, Table, are likely Arabized forms of the Ethiopic words Wangel, itself derived from the Greek Evangelion, meaning Gospel, and Ma'ed, meaning banquet or table. And this comes from, as I say, G.S. Reynolds in his book The Qur'an and the Bible. Manfred Kropp researched the topic Ethiopic influence on the Qur'an and early Islam since 2002, and I found a paper which is listed there called Beyond Single Words, and you can see that there are 4 words in particular that he focuses on. The one that I'm going to focus on today is Ma'idah. He says that now it is evident that the loan words are the best and clearest indicators of influence, but even these have not been really studied exhaustively. Many questions have been left open, even in the magisterial study of Noldeke and those of his followers. Were these words already known in the contemporary Arabic of Muhammad's time, or are they innovations of the Quranic text and message? And obviously a note in passing that Kropp assumes the standard Islamic narratives. Even if we cannot tell whether these words were already current in pre-Islamic Arabia before Muhammad's time and before his message, these terms form a special layer of the vocabulary expressing religious concepts in the core of that message. Special emphasis on that last part. If we can say and decide that they are definitely Ethiopic, and not, let us say, Aramaic, Syriac, and so on, or at least that they have not arrived directly from these spheres, then we will have an important statement about possible religious and cultural influence. Now we use that word intertextuality again. We're talking here that intertextuality, not direct borrowing of Christian texts, is involved, according to him. In this volume, Bowering rightly points out that still today we cannot precisely identify textual parallels in the Qur'an and Jewish or Christian texts. Instead, we have only loose or vague allusions which point to a rich oral transmission to Muhammad of the concepts and contents of foreign texts, not to a direct contact by reading or reciting those texts. I think a lot of what he says there is arguable, the assumption that it's just merely through oral transmission. He obviously accepts the standard Islamic narrative that Muhammad is illiterate and that he is getting these ideas through an oral tradition. We don't know if any of that's true, and in fact I doubt if much of that is true. But leaving that aside, I think there's still something to explore there. The other thing I would say is Christoph Luxemburg and Luling would probably contradict what he's just said and say that no, there are actual textual parallels between the Quran and Jewish and Christian texts, and that's something I'd like to explore further, just to either confirm or deny that. So it'll be interesting to see what we discover over the next few videos as we work our way through these. He goes on to say that in the 3rd century AD, Ethiopia was exerting military and political force in Yemen. It established garrisons and stable settlements in the Tihama. Probably the Ethiopians never left Yemen again until the time of Abraha, the Ethiopian but independent reign of Yemen of the middle of the 6th century and the subsequent Persian invasion some decades before Islam. Some mosques in the Tihama till today show architectural features of Christian Ethiopic churches. When it comes to the question of Ethiopic influence, one has first to consider an important fact. Ethiopia is first Christianized by a Lebanese man, a merchant's son of Tyre, called Surah. The Ethiopian church formally and juridically depended on the Patriarchate of Alexandria, but most of the important and influential missionaries came from Syria and Palestine. The same region also heavily influenced adjacent Arabia. As a result, it can be difficult to decide if a given word or a given influence came directly from Syria-Palestine or via Ethiopia to Arabia. Now, the example that we'll look at later, we can say that in terms of its particular spelling and form, this particular Ethiopic word, it's this particular Quranic word clearly has a form that has come directly from Ethiopic, and that word in turn was created using either Greek or Latin. But in terms of its direct influence, we can determine that it comes from Ethiopia. So that's going to be quite relevant. Now, so the word that we're looking at is Ma'ida. It has no etymological explanation in Semitic. That's hugely significant. That means that the word is foreign to Arabic. So what does he have to say about it? He says Ma'ida in the Quran, which is Surah 5, verse 112 and 114. It's a clear borrowing from Ethiopic ma'edda, with the meaning table, dishes, banquet. As usual for the words for table in these languages, it is a foreign word having no etymological explanation in Semitic. The etymon is most probably Vulgar Latin or Koine Greek. Majida, or table, plate of wood, silver, and so on, only rarely attested in literature. The translators of the Ethiopic Bible replace consequently Tarapeza, which would have been the Ethiopic word that they could have used, by Maida, obviously producing the word from the word Majida, thus following the general guidelines for early Christian Bible translators to use a popular, generally understood language, not necessarily a literary one. So if they've taken the word Majida, they've turned it into Maida. Okay, and the evidence for this is that it's in the Ethiopic Bible, which is pretty strong evidence. And note the name given for Surah 5, Al-Ma'idah, is Ethiopic in origin as a result of what we just said. And just to reiterate, the vulgar Latin or Koine Greek word Majida became first Ma'idah when the Bible was being translated into Ethiopic. Now, I'm not sure why there's sort of a ambiguity about whether it's Latin or Greek. Our author doesn't say. We'll leave that question aside. If there are any linguists watching, maybe you can clarify that. Is it coming from both languages? Is the word existing in both languages? That would be nice to know. Okay, so first thing, Surah 5, there are 4 references to light, and there are 2 examples below, and this is going to be relevant to a text that we'll see in a bit. A light from God has come to you in a clear book, and then again, he brings them out of darkness into light. Now we have further on in Surah 5, the familiar passage where the word Ma'idah is used in the Arabic, and it's translated as table. If you look at Surah 5, ayah or verse 114, Jesus unto Mary said, O God, our Lord, send down for us a table from heaven to be a festival for us, for the first of us and the last of us, and a sign from you, and provide for us. You are the best of providers. There is also in ayah 112 a reference to, is your Lord able to bring down for us a feast from heaven? And it goes on to say, he said, fear God if you are believers. So where is all of this coming from? Is there any piece of text that's the influence behind all of this? Now if we look towards the end, 115, it says, God said, I will send it down to you, presumably the table, or perhaps it refers to the feast. I will send it down to you, so this feast from heaven, but whoever among you disbelieves thereafter, I will punish him with a punishment, the like of which I never punish any other being. So, in a Christian context, that would be the Eucharist, wouldn't it? The bread come down from heaven. The worst punishment would be for someone who is a disbeliever. So whoever among you disbelieves thereafter, I will punish him with a punishment, the like of which I never punish any other being, i.e. in terms of disbelieving in the Eucharist, which is a strange text to have in the middle of a Qur'an. Would you not think so? So, the author goes on to say that at the end of this paper, I will present a passage taken from an Ethiopic homily, which breathes the atmosphere of the Quranic text. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't say when this text was written, and I haven't been able to determine it. And maybe in future research I'll be able to trace it. But presumably he's talking about texts that came prior to the time of Muhammad, or at least the time of that the Quranic passage would have been written. I'm leaving aside the question of Muhammad here. So here's what he's come up with. He says, the homily of John, Bishop of Aksum. This is the direct source. And you can see the source that he has taken it from was originally identified in 1898. So this text has only been translated about 100 years, and it is not very well known. So this is probably the first time it's even mentioned on YouTube. So another first here for this channel. So here it is. the homily of John, Bishop of Aksum, in honour of Garima. The 9 saints from the Byzantine Empire have come to Ethiopia, share a house there, celebrate common prayers, and dedicate their lives to preaching and works of charity. I presume that part is just an explanation piece. It's not part of the actual text itself, because it's unlikely that the word Byzantine Empire would have been used, in the 7th century or 6th century, let's say. So we're going to assume that everything beyond that is from the actual homily. Every time they came together at the table, Ma'ida, lights descend on them, shining like the sun. So you have the 2 key words together in that one sentence. Table, the Ma'ida, so it's a direct link, and also the idea of lights. Remember, the light was being referred to 4 times in that surah. They tasted food only at dawn in the morning, and on the Sabbath, on Christmas, the day of his birth, and on the day of Epiphany. On the day of the miracle of Cana, they did not taste food except the Eucharist, flesh and blood of Christ, and on Easter and Pentecost they ate only 3 grapes of wine. Goes on, angels descend to tell them to disband, that each of them might search his own region to preach. The angels are welcomed in the saints' house. And when they had completed the washing of the feet of the angels, and had drunk the remaining water, they sat for meal, and the light appeared as usual. Again, the reference to light. When they had finished the table, Ma'ida, they heard a voice coming and calling on them. Angels were visiting them. They had visions of our Lord, until they were capable of resurrecting the dead, healing the lepers by their prayer, as well as making the blind see, and the lame walk, and the deaf hear. Thus they performed many miracles, and the lights, as usual, kept descending from heaven on their table, Ma'ide. Thus they stayed for 13 years. It goes on to say, then a monk came to them named Malkianos, who did not know any other work than women's hairdressing. He made his living out of that. He did not sit at their table, and ate his bread alone. Thus they rebuked him, but thereafter these lights departed from them, and shone above that monk. The saints then asked, where are our lights that used to come down from heaven on our table, Ma'idas? Why are they now hidden from us? The monk answered them, my masters, today this light is shining upon me. At this moment they understood and said, that happens because we have rebuked this monk. They embraced each other, wept bitterly for 40 days and nights, and then they departed separately, each one in his new region. So, a very interesting piece of text and a very important piece of evidence. We can see here that an Ethiopic word was used for Surah 5, and it was influenced directly by a homily, from what we can tell, from a homily by a bishop of Aksum, which is in Ethiopia, just across the Red Sea from Arabia. So leave your comments below and tell me what you think. And do you think that there is any substance to the idea that the Quranic writers might have been influenced by hymns and homilies from their time, or perhaps from before their time? So leave your comments below, and I look forward to reading them.